Now, the first thing in making a tree is understanding the shape of one, because I've seen a million painted trees that just looked unnatural. And the truth be told, it's a difficult thing to do, but there is a system to it. Let's start with the trunk. What I'm going to do, you can see my little dot where I was trying to decide where to put my tree. I'm going to start just by making a not perfectly straight trunk. I've got this leaning a little bit to the right, like it's, maybe hanging out over the water just a tad. I'm going to decide, and this color I'm using is just a grayish brown. We're going to be painting a lot of stuff over it. It's not vital to use any exact shade of brown or gray in this. Going right over my background there. For the most part, I'm going to start by making the trunk straight. But I'll tell you this about the trunk. You can make it a double trunk or you can make it zigzagging, but whatever you do with the trunk of the tree is going to be the kind of the basis for the branches. The branches will mirror and be miniature replications of the trunk to a degree. So if I had a real straight trunk, then I probably would not have a bunch of real gnarly winding branches. You see, I'd have a whole lot of, typically. We have these ponderosa pines here in Flagstaff that have pretty gnarly branches and straight trunks. So just forget what I said. I'm going to show you how to make a tree look natural. Okay. So I'm going to put just a slight curve in it because I just don't want this to look all perfect and straight. You can experiment with just how crooked you can make the trunk and still have it look normal. But I always just err towards slightly less rather than more. And I'll go ahead and flare the roots out down here, make those coming in toward the water. We'll just say this is like a floodplain here, and this tree is enjoying the supply of water here. And maybe these roots are going to come down and come across this trail. I can do more of that with my little detail brush. Maybe go like this. Now notice as I do the roots coming off of this tree that I have this rounded section in between so that it looks like, so right here it's just a sharp corner where the roots are overlapping. As I wrap around the front of it, I space them apart a little bit more. I'm trying to get perspective with my tree already by the way I make the roots. So then these roots on the edges are closer together. And that gives the tree more perspective. Typically, the lowest branches on a tree are the ones that are the least upward pointing. Unless it's a branch off of the trunk. You might have a double trunk. In fact, let's just go ahead and do a double trunk on this one just to demonstrate that. Maybe this tree splits right about here, and then it has a double trunk on it. Goes like this. So that is not what I'm talking about with the branches. We'll do this, and we'll kind of do the same kind of curves on this. I'll do the same kind of curves as I did with the trunk of the tree. I'm trying to make that consistent. And then you also want a steady tapering. You want it to get continuously smaller and smaller. It'll look funny if it gets skinnier than fatter again. You want to try to be, wherever you have a curve in the tree, you want to have real consistent width of the trunk. But as I build the branches out, they typically attach with a more upward angle, and then they extend out with an angle that's more level. This is how the lower branches are. And then it'll come out straight for a little while, and then it'll do something similar to what the trunk has done. And it'll just have a little bit of a bend in it, as I get thinner and further out, I'm also going to make the zigzags and kinks in my branch get closer together. So you see, the branch is getting smaller. I always see branches that are going jun, 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 or on a tree, or you know, there's all this, the zigzag that's way out here, you have the same lengths and the same number of changes way out. But what I'm saying is, as it tapers and gets smaller, I'm making smaller and smaller kinks and bends in it. So that, you know, it's kind of like a fractal, like the fern that has the tiny pattern connected to the bigger pattern. And you try to make it proportional. Let's do another one. Let's make another branch coming off. As it gets higher on the tree, I'm going to stick with that same pattern, but point a little bit more upward. Now this one, I keep dipping my brush in the water here. I went up on this one, so on this one I'll first zigzag downward, like that. Okay, then I'm getting closer together. Now this is difficult to do with this big brush, I'm not gonna lie. You can use a smaller one. I've got water in it to make the brush flow a little bit smoother. Now here's a way to make branches. If we're going to do some branches in perspective, every branch is not going to attach straight. Like if one's coming toward you, it might look something like this. It might go up and arch, and the effect might be that you just start here and make the branch like this. Because maybe it's coming up first before it comes toward you. By doing odd shapes like this, you can make things look like they're in perspective. So then I'll take this one and I'll bend it up, and I'll do more extreme bends in this one because I want this one to look like it's going more toward you. Most trees that I've seen end with an upward bend on the branches, unless they're dead branches. Like when the pines start getting old, they'll start curling downward. But live trees, they kind of point at the sun. So the branches, most often near the ends, will start curling upward. So you see, I go upward, I level it out, then at the end, I start going upward again. That's a very common pattern with trees. So I'll do that. Then let's do some branches going straight across the center, because I don't want this to look like a flat image. I want it to have perspective. So we'll just make a branch just coming right across here. Then I'll bend it, come around here, like that. And who knows where that, you know, maybe that attaches down in here somewhere. And then I can make another branch coming off of that. I'm having a hard time now with this big brush, so I'll wait until I get into the detail brush to add branches that are smaller than these guys. Maybe some like that, some there. I'll do the same thing on this side. You want to avoid doing a branch exactly across from another branch. It just has a low likelihood of a tree being consistently symmetrical, so it'll look more natural if you try to make it similar but offset it. See how I did that? As I get higher on the branch, higher on the tree, the branches are going to start pointing more and more upward. So these branches are going to be more like this up here. And then these branches are going to be more like this up here. And then these branches are going to come right off the trunk, and you'll have something here. So you see, a tree's branches almost always have this pattern to them, where the ones coming off the tip of the tree are going straight up, and they flare more and more toward a horizontal line as they get lower on the trunk. Once you establish that pattern, it looks good to break it. Just do more branches that follow the pattern than branches that break it. That's the rule about breaking rules, is that you do more elements that follow the rules than elements that break the rules. And as long as you follow that rule, things will look natural. Yes, I'm insane. The colors of the leaves I'm going to define as my true green, which is just a green that I chose. That's just a bright, bold green. I mixed it myself, but you could just buy the color already mixed. Then I have my bright green, which has a lot more white and yellow in it. And then I have my shadow color, which is just a mix, probably 50-50 black and blue. And then I have a white, the same white I used in my clouds that I've used in all these other parts of this picture, and that's going to be for my bright highlights. I'll show you how I use those colors. This first layer is going to be a very distant gray-green because these are the leaves that are not getting hit directly by sunlight. So what I'll do is I'll mix my true green with my blue-black mix, also with the white, and the result is going to be a very muted and grayish bluish green. That's going to be the most distant color. Now I am trying to see how I put it right on the end of that branch. It's not entirely necessary to stay right on the end of your branches. We're just making splotches wherever you want them to be. But I am eventually, as I get to the front layers, I will put more of these on the branches themselves. So put some on the branches, put some off the branches. I just don't want to tell you to be real restricted in this, because you want the tree, you want to free yourself up and have a nice random flow to it. You don't want to be trying to strategically place these things. So I'm just filling it in, but I am going behind the trunk. These leaves right now I don't want to put in front of the trunk because these are distant. This green, this is the bright one that has the more yellow and white in it. What this color is, what it represents in the picture, is the sun shining through leaves, illuminating them. So it's a very bright color. And the effect of the sun shining through leaves has a yellower color to it than when you just see it shining off of the surface. So the question is, where am I going to put this? Well, I'm going to go back and forth with my colors as we progress, but right now I'm going to stick to mostly around the edges because I want this to look like the leaves. They're getting lit by the sun from the opposite side of the tree. So I might throw a few dots in here, just the tiniest little things, because they could be where you're actually seeing through these dark leaves, and little bits of illuminated leaves are showing through, but not a lot, only a little. So I'm going to put clusters of them in between the clusters I've already made. And then I'm going to kind of border this, but don't do it out. It's not like, we're not doing like the cloud with the silver lining. You're just doing it in places around the border. I'm going to do little bits. This is not, if you do outlines, it's going to look weird. A typical deciduous tree with leaves and everything, like if this was a maple, it would have a cluster branching out like this and then another one next to it here, and it would just be starring out where all of the branches come out. So I'll try to do a look like that. Let's just start with one right in here. Now, I don't want to paint right over everything I already painted. So I am trying to cover areas that are, I'm strategically looking for areas that are less interesting, where I haven't done much. So right there, I put down the darkest shadow color. Then I'm going to come in with this true green. And I'm going to start putting in these leaves. Now these are going to pop forward right away, these leaves on this dark surface. And the wet on wet technique gives you a lot of sharp little edges. So you can see that I'm leaving more black near the base and then less black as I get higher. And I'll go ahead and let the two colors mix together. I'll keep working it until it mixes to a large degree, because that true black, that it's way too black for something this far away. So I am gonna keep mixing it until most of that black is gone. Then I'll come back with the green again. I want the very top of it to be almost pure green. I'm gonna do some dark areas by mixing the dark green that I've been doing and just doing dark areas across the empty space in the backdrop. So these leaves that have this dark shadow are the ones that are in the dark middle of the tree, and they're not as distant as these lighter colored ones. And so I'll just connect some of these bunches together with just these dots of the darker color. That's going to give this tree dimension, is having those dark connections so that it looks like, oh, there's all these different depths of leaves in there. As I'm coming down, I'm going to change where I put the bright green on the bunches. So when I say bunches, as this is a bunch, you know, this is a bunch. I'm going to make this dark color, and instead of putting the bright green right at the top of it this time, since this is lower on the tree, once again I'll create perspective by lowering the bright spot so that it looks like it's got a shadow on the top side of it. Seems like a small thing, but these are the things that create a realistic tree that actually has depth to it. I know that trunk is not looking realistic. We'll get to that. But watch how I put this highlight of green down low on this instead of up high. But then I won't go all the way down. I'll still leave some dark under it. But see how that bright spot just comes right out there? Just go like that. And I'll do a few more of these coming down. I'll do them maybe coming down from behind some of these too. Like maybe I'll do some dark leaves connecting here, just like I connected them here. And then I'll make it hanging down, because as it gets lower in the tree, they're not pointed as much upward. So maybe I'll put some in here coming downward, like this. And a lot of these I don't even need to put the bright green on. I can leave a lot of the dark color. So I'll just do kind of a more even mix and not a lot of the bright green in there. I'm going to do bigger leaf patterns here, because if I make some bigger leaf patterns, that will also create some perspective in the tree. So there's a lot of things in painting just this one object that I'll do to create a three-dimensional perspective. And if I have some areas that have larger shapes, it's going to come forward more. So like maybe I should have made this one with larger shapes too. Maybe I should have made some of these. But I mean, that's something you can tell what I'm talking about. I'll put more in here. These will be some branches coming out forward, you know, and the leaves will be bigger. I'll put a shadow under this right here, and then put some big leaves. So now it's time to do highlights on my little bunches of leaves here. So I'm going to take this bright color that I've been using, and I already started doing this, and I just kind of came across this technique just now while I was doing it, but I really like it. Just outline. I'm not going to outline, I'm just going to go along the border of each of these bunches and put little dots of this bright color, because it totally defines where they are and adds that look of some of the leaves popping up, because that's where these kind of leaves would occur, is on the outer edges where they're sticking up and the sun's shining through them. So see, I've got a bunch here, so I'll just go around the edge of it and add this bright yellow or green, like that. And any other bunches on the tree, I'll do like just a couple in here, just around the bright. I wouldn't want to make it down in the black areas, just where the bright green is. Make a few here. There's a little bunch here. It's totally going to give some shape to this tree. But that's just the start. I'm going to use another color to do the little accents on it. So let's get done with this one. Some there, some there. The problem is, whenever I find a new technique that I really like, I always end up going too far with it. It's like clockwork. It's just watch it happen. So I'm not going to do it right now. Green and white. Now this white does have a tiny bit of yellow in it, but it's insignificant because the green has way more yellow in it already than the white does. So it's not even going to show up. The point is that I lightened it with white, and it's not nearly as yellow of a shade of green as these. And what that's gonna look like is areas that are directly hit by the sun, but the sunlight is glaring and reflecting off of the leaves. That's what this bright color does. So I'll put it on the very tips of my bunches of leaves, only where I have the bright green. And I like to do real skinny lines too, because sometimes leaves are turned sideways. So you can see I just do a little, you know, that. Wherever I have these little bunches of leaves. Maybe a couple in here would be good. And it's a trick to get this green so that it's real light. You want it as light as you can get it, but at the same time you don't want to get it so light that it ceases to look green. Now it's time to start working on the trunk and the branches. So I need to do some light and shadow. Where are they going to be? I've already established with my mountains and clouds that I've got to have it coming somewhat from the right side, and it looks like it's midday, so the sun's going to be way up, shining mostly on the right side, but there's going to be a lot of downward shadows. So now that I know that, I'm going to start putting those in place. This is my pure black right out of the can. It's just a can of Rust-Oleum black latex paint. So I'll revolve between the black and the bark color. And I'll have all bark color right here. I'm just calling it bark color now. It's the brown that I did the tree with. I'll just have less and less of the black as I move over toward the right side of the tree. But I do want to have a lot of this black on here because I want a nice sharp silhouette of a tree trunk, just because this is an interesting object towards the front of my picture. So just by going back and forth, and just doing these little strokes with this little chiseled brush, it'll start creating texture. So now I'll take the white, and over on the very edge, I'm going to still have it be darker than the background. The edge of this tree, I'm going to mix that white in until it becomes this bluish gray. And I'm just going to have that on the very edge of this tree. Just like that. And then I want it to transition from that to the darkest to the brown. Make that brown wrapping around, forget about that leaf right there. And I'm going to create a shadow. A shadow that is the width of the branch. Any branch coming out toward me, because of where the sun's coming from, will have a shadow that is the width of the branch and going down at the angle that the sun is shining. It's casting a shadow on the tree. So I'll just fade this out here. And then the same thing on the other side, right here. I'll make a harder line right here. And I'll just make this diagonal line go down until it meets this edge where it disappears. Now that I've established this, anywhere on this tree that I put these colors on the left side of something, it's going to make it wrap around. So like on this branch right here, if I start putting that color, it's going to make that branch turn away. Make it look like it's going like that, and then coming across again back behind these branches, and I'll put another little shadow. So in this part of my tree, I'm going to just redefine all my branches. I painted over most of them. You don't have to do that if you're painting a tree. You know, I just chose to put a ton of leaves on here, but you could always do less. So now let's do some of the highlight color. The highlight color is going to be over on this side. And that one, I'm going to take this same brown, but add white to that. So you see, for the backlight color, I added white to the black. For the highlight color, I'm adding white to the brown. It's just like the leaves where I have my true object color in the middle, but then I have the shadow and the highlight. Okay, so then I'll do these vertical strokes. This paint is real sticky, so I have to keep dipping in the water. And I'll bring this color right up to that shadow. Just like this. And I want to try to leave long areas, these vertical cracks in there. I like the way those look. I don't want to have a whole lot of light dark texture where I'm making shadows. I'll make them all kind of wrapping around this tree. Then as it gets further and further away from the top of the tree, I'll just make it more obscure and blend it together. And right here, see, I'm blending up into my shadow, trying to get them all to be the same value. And then in here we've got a branch coming out, and we could put some of the lighter color in there. And then we've got a branch coming up through here. So now's where I decide what leaves I want to paint back over to make my branches appear. So I'll make some shadows. I'll make some real dark shadows of tree branches in here. And then if I start with the dark color, that makes it easy for me to just do those little highlights like I did on that trunk. Do some here. There's a part of a tree branch coming up through there. I don't want a lot of this one. I don't want a whole ton of it, so I make sure not a huge amount is in my brush, and I'll just make little diagonal strokes on the right side. See, and it's just like the light coming down through that tree and hitting that branch. I can make a little bit on this edge. That's kind of facing downward, so I don't want to do a whole lot there. So you see, wherever it's going vertical, I have more of this side showing. But wherever it comes toward me, black goes all the way to the edge. The underside of it is black. So I can keep revolving and make this branch look like it's stair-stepping out toward me. Especially if I put those highlights on it, it brings it out to the edge of the picture. Okay, now this tree needs a shadow in order to make it fit the rest of the picture here. The shadow is just going to be my green and that blue-black mix. And I'm just going to feather that in to this grass that I did. Just those two colors. It's pretty simple. Just the green. But the thing is, I'm going to leave space open because there's light coming through those leaves and there's going to be patches. You can see that I already put my dark shadow dirt mix right there where the shadow is going over the dirt. You can watch the how to paint dirt section for more on that one. It's kind of fun how you can just throw two colors down, and just by mixing them together in this way you can get that look of grass. So I'm just going to mix my favorite combo for distant trees here. That's just black, yellow, and white. That'll be my base. And I'm going to make sure that it is darker than the hills behind it because I'm making this closer. So I'll make it just a little bit darker. So I'm going to take this little brush, just using my arm for a palette, and I want to flare out the end of this. And sometimes I have to dab it on my shirt to get it dry. Sometimes I have to do this, sometimes I blow on them. Like that. Whatever it takes to get it kind of like this texture where it's all flared out. Then I'll put it in this light green that I mixed. This brush wants to make pine trees, I'm gonna let it. I'll leave a lot of empty space down here because I'll show you how I can just put in just little suggestions of tree trunks. Look how I could just dab it and do all these little distant ones. But I could make it more round too, watch. If I take the same shape and just connect it together, make rounder shapes, then maybe they're not all pine trees. Say we could put some big round ones in there. Just fade it down. I'll get a little bit more. Put it on the, just right at the ridge of this. And then maybe I'll even take some and put a little bit of this color up in here too. For there I'd want to add white because it's a little further away, so I'll add a little bit of white. Then I'll use that same color, I'll do some highlights on these. I'll go over these same trees I just painted. Just do little highlights. Now these could be any colors. I'm saying that this green I'm using is a little bit on the white side. Put these little guys in here. Let's do just a couple more of those. So now I'm trying to stay kind of at the same shadow, the same value, but just a little different shade. Just painting the space in between tree trunks and branches. And then, if I want, I can put just a little bit of definition on some of these pines here, just by taking this brown that I used on the tree up in the front, and just mixing that with these distant colors, and I could just kind of define some of these trunks. Maybe make some highlights, just like I did with the tree up in the front. Just the tiniest little guys. Maybe have a little bit of a shadow here. I don't know. Makes it look like there's green grass traveling up into there, you know. I thought it'd be cool to do one kind of going off where you can't see the top or the bottom of it, and that's a real cool trick to do in a painting, is to do some object in the painting that's not completely framed out within the painting. A picture looks more believable if there's something going off of the frame. I think it'd be cool to put a little hole, maybe some animal or something lives in there. You know, and then this will be cool because I'll put some branches coming off of that. We'll just put one. It broke. Like that. It's just shooting out right across there. First, I'm just putting in my true green just because I just want to establish where I'm putting a leaf. So I'm going to make one kind of stretching out this way, and I want it like it's laying flat in perspective. So remember up here, I added white to this color to have the areas that I wanted it to look like the more reflective color of the sun bouncing off of it. So I add white. Watch how I make the top side of this leaf. Okay, this is mixing white with the color I already have down. It's still wet. And so now I'm just making the the top side of a leaf. Okay. The more saturated green underneath immediately starts to look like the underside of a leaf when it's compared to this light green. I'm going to call this the light green. Then I have my real bright green. Okay, I'm going to call this not the light green, but the bright green. This was the one that had the more yellow in it. And remember, this was where the sun was shining through the leaves, illuminating them. So maybe some of this area, just some of it, is thinner spots on the leaf and the sun's coming through and just lighting it up. I don't want to overdo it. Okay, so we'll put some of that bright one in there. See, like that. See, just that little bit of yellow tone really makes it look like an illuminated leaf. And then we'll put one real bright leaf right here. This will be fun. See that real bright color? Because of this color in comparison with the other colors around it, it'll end up looking like a leaf that's getting lit up as the sun's shining through it. Now watch what I can do if I come over it with the other green. This was that other darker green that I called the true green. You can do these little veins, and then they come out this way, and then they come out this way, and this way, and this way, and this way. We go like this. Then we have a shadow cast on the leaf, like that. We'll bring that leaf up in there a little bit more. Now I want to stress this one thing, that I really try not to mix this shadow color with my bright, more yellow color. It's just, the colors tend to be more separated from each other just because of the way the light and the shadow occur. And if you mix them, you get kind of a dirty green that doesn't really go with the rest of the picture. Okay, so I got all my trees in the picture. I got my close-up tree with the details, got my distant trees. So I'm thinking this is ready to be called done. So I'm going to finish up the edges, call it finished for now.